Let's make a video. Good afternoon, Lumberfoots and Meeflies. Recently, I've been doing costumes from big name popular franchises, and I thought, you know what would be a neat change of pace if I walked a convention floor and absolutely freaking nobody recognized what character I was cosplaying. Unfortunately, I only really got to wear Kerillian at C2E2 because due to a number of extenuating circumstances of which I am sure we are all aware, I don't know when my next con is gonna be. Techo is postponed, ACEN is just cancelled. Hopefully Dragon Con is still happening, we'll see. Now Vermintide is a Warhammer game that I love, but with a truly tragic lack of fan content. Fan art is scarce. I've only seen a couple of cosplays from it, which are all very good. If you're a Vermintide cosplayer, I guarantee you I've seen your cosplay. You're doing amazing. I love you, thank you for your service. There are literally only like 10 Vermintide fanfictions on AO3, and one of them may or may not be mine. Wait. Anyway. Now the fan content that does exist is wonderful, and I'm very thankful for it. Except for the freak rat pornography you degenerates have been drawing of my girl. Turn on your location. I just want to talk. But it is not enough, and I am starving over here, you guys. Anyway, the point is, sometimes you have to be the fan content you want to see in the world, so here I am. Is it weird to cosplay your own waifu? Asking for a friend. So if you would like to make your own extremely wood elfy tree bark armor, or you're just curious to see how I did mine, let's go. I'll usually start by making a drawing just to cement the image of the thing in my mind, but something extra I find helpful for armor or costumes with a lot of pieces is to do the sketch in a program with a layers function like Clip Studio or Photoshop, so I can view each layer of the costume separately but on the same drawing. This cosplay is not particularly complicated, but if you're attempting something with an absurd amount of detail, Monster Hunter! This is a great way to break it down into less overwhelming chunks so you can figure out where to start. Now fetch your pattern making supplies. Measure out approximately how wide you want the various segments to be. Write these measurements on the nearest available blank surface for your own reference. Next, draw a paper template for the individual pieces. Since her armor is made of such organic shapes, they're fairly forgiving of a lack of precision. You can draw them somewhat haphazardly, and it's okay if they're not completely straight. Just so the dimensions are approximately to scale and the pieces fall where we want them to. Once you've checked your work against your body, it's time to cut out your EVA foam. Trace your templates onto the foam and cut them out with a utility or hobby knife that is much sharper than the one you see me using here. We're going to move to the Dremel portion of this process, but let me preface it by saying, if you are watching this at a time when personal protective equipment is still a scarce commodity and you do not already have a particulate filter mask, just skip this step, it's really not that important. We're going to begin by creating some basic bark striations on the surface of our armor pieces. If freehanding a rotary tool scares you, you can draw out the lines with a marker first. Carve the bark grain into the foam and smooth out the edges. Use a heat gun to smooth out the surface and eliminate any leftover Dremel fuzzies. Now this key technique is one recommended to me by my friend Tart Cosplay, who I can only describe as some kind of hot glue sorcerer. Working a little at a time, draw blobby lines of hot glue down each piece using the grain lines we already drew as a loose guideline. Then take a piece of crumpled up nonstick parchment paper and lay it down on top of the still squishy hot glue. Set it aside and work on a different piece until that one cools. After a few minutes, peel off the paper and marvel at the crunchy bark texture you have just created. Repeat this until it looks like all of your pieces are plagued with some sort of grotesque skin condition. Take a moment to reward yourself by enjoying the sensory experience of pulling off all the hot glue strings you now have because you used cheap bargain bin glue sticks for this task. Hot glue is generally too slippery for good paint adhesion, so I'm priming everything with a coat of black gesso so I have a uniform dark base to work with. After allowing the gesso layer to dry, begin painting by building up color in several layers. First apply an even coat of your darkest brown, or whatever you decide you want your base neutral to be. Warhammer mini painters, the color I'm using here is a cheap raw umber acrylic that is a dead ringer for Citadel Dryad bark, if that helps. Once that dries, take your next color and, with slightly less paint on the brush, brush it over the texture without bothering to work it into the deeper crevices. Essentially, we're highlighting the raised parts of the bark by dry brushing lightly over them. Imagine you're the crappy toothbrush in an infomercial for fancy toothbrushes. You skim the surfaces while not reaching any of the plaque, or dark paint in the nooks and crannies. I used 4 or 5 different colors for a natural-ish variation, but user discretion based on your reference. I can't tell you how to live your life, but I will suggest you vary not only the value of your colors, but also the hue for a more dimensional paint job. Once your browns are done, begin creating a moss effect by dry brushing green paint where necessary. Doing this first will create a more natural look than just slapping on some fake moss directly. Feel free to spend an hour tumbling down a Wikipedia hole learning about the incredible diversity of mosses, lichens, and algae if you're like me and that sort of thing excites you. Unless of course you have a deadline to meet, in which case make it 2 hours. Once again, try not only to vary the value of the green, but the hue as well. Switching gears, I now need to assemble the only part made of 2 pieces stuck together. If you recall, I cut the largest pieces too, which join at a curve in the center, which helps it maintain shape and contour more closely over my hip. I'm just using contact cement for this, and the great thing about this bark is that you don't need to worry if the seam is visible since the entire thing is just cracks and divots. Now use a heat gun to mold the pieces into a curve so they fit against your body. The hot glue adds a stiffness to the foam that actually helps it keep its shape pretty well. Corellian's armor plates appear to be threaded together with some sort of twine, so I'll do the same with some random beige cording I had. Something strange but mostly beneficial that happens to me is that all of my colleagues and acquaintances know me as the one who makes costumes. So anytime somebody's grandma dies or moves to an assisted living facility, they end up giving me all of her sewing materials and craft supplies. That's why half of my tools are from the 50s and 60s, and also why I usually just happen to have the perfect niche item for a job, like this giant rug needle that is perfect for threading cord through armor. You can see I'm tying a loop at certain junctures. This will be where we thread the stretchy cord that ties around the leg. After reinforcing the knots with more hot glue since, I mean, we might as well at this point, I'm taking a plastic buckle attached to some nylon webbing and gluing it down to the inside. This will be what does most of the legwork of holding the armor to my body. I have also attached the other half of the buckle to a piece of webbing with the other end sewn into a loop. This threads onto my belt to hold the whole thing up. I'm using some stretchy cording for the parts that tie around my leg. When I'm ready to wear it, I can just tie a bow and scoot the knot back until it's hidden underneath the armor. This way I can also easily extricate myself from the costume later without having to perform a magic show escape routine. Once all of your laces are fitted, the last step is adding moss. You can buy preserved reindeer moss at your local craft store once going to the craft store is a socially acceptable activity again. Shred up the different colors into smaller pieces for some variety and glue them to the mossy parts. I recommend making at least one project with this stuff so you can enjoy the bonus smells it comes with. Seriously, it might just be me, but it smells so good I want my whole body to smell like this at all times. If you know of a moss-scented perfume, please tell me in the comments. And with that, your bark armor is complete. You're ready to get out there, murder some Packsworn, and deal an alarming amount of friendly fire damage. Hopefully you look, feel, and smell great. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments.